You want to record the most professional song you can in your home studio. I'm going to show you what parts of this process you really need to focus on in order to maximize the quality of your sound. The reason I'm making this video is because I hear people discussing certain production tools, ideas, techniques, and these like magic pill quick fixes that will theoretically make your song sound amazing, but in reality, they're totally irrelevant and they aren't helping you because the problems that you're having with your songs are stemming from other areas of the process. Parts of the process that you might have never paid attention to before. Everyone wants that magic tool, that quick fix to quickly fix their mix. But in reality, these types of magic pills and quick fixes are far and few between when it comes to audio and acoustics. The market is flooded with bullshit products that are very alluring and very distracting. And they make you feel like you can kind of skip part of the process and that this magic tool is just gonna do that part for you, when in reality, you need to pay attention to everything all the way through. And you need to be focusing on certain parts of the process. With that being said, I do actually have a piece of gear that for me is somewhat of a quick fix magic tool. And it's right here. And I'm gonna show you it really soon. So stick around and I'll show you what this thing's all about. Let's go through the entire process right now, start to finish, and then I'll circle back and I'll tell you which parts I think you should really be focusing on. And I'm even gonna rate them. I'm gonna rate them 1 to 10, 10 being where you should really be focusing. In order to kind of simplify this explanation, I'm going to relate everything back to recording vocals. Like this whole process, we're going to pretend it's strictly for vocals, just to maintain some kind of consistency so you can really wrap your head around what I'm trying to explain. So without further ado, here is the process and where I think you should focus in order to create great vocals for your song. The very first part of this process is songwriting. We need to write a song that sounds great. Spend time in the beginning making sure you're writing not just a good song, but a song that fits your vocals. Or if you're working with another vocalist, make sure it fits their vocals really well. Make sure they're singing in the right style, make sure it's in the right key. If you have to move it up or down a few semitones to really maximize the potential of what the vocalist has going on, experiment until it sounds great. Sometimes people will write a mediocre song and they'll think that, hey, further down the line in production, we're just gonna do a bunch of cool shit and make the song sound awesome. And while there are definitely tons of cool production tricks you can do to enhance a song and make it sound great, consider if you start with a great song and then you add the production at the end, and then the entire thing is just elevated and you've got this masterpiece of a song. So spend some time writing a good song. Moving forward, we need to find a room where we're going to record our vocals. People seem to obsess with vocal booths and putting foam on their walls and having tons of absorption and like things that you put around your microphone, like the vocal shield, all kinds of weird things. Please remember that there are a million ways to record a vocal, and we don't need to cram every vocalist into a tiny little vocal booth. Not all vocals need to be recorded in a completely dead room. So stop being followers, stop doing what you see other people doing on the internet. Don't try to copy what they're doing because they have a certain sound they're going for. And just really try to think about what you want your sound to sound like and work with what you have. Do some experimenting at home. Don't just build a 4x5 vocal booth that's gonna like possibly work against you and kill your sound. And don't just cover your room with absorption because you think that all reverberations and echoes are bad. Just think about what you're doing, consider what you're going for, before you invest any money or make any huge changes to your room. Next up is the vocal performance that's taking place in this room. We need these vocals to be sounding great and in tune. You wouldn't record your guitar if it was out of tune, right? And you wouldn't record your drums if your snare was tuned like crap and it was all floppy and loose. You would tune it up and make it sound good before you started. I know it's exciting when we have this killer song in our headphones and we've got our mic set up and it's got some reverb on it and we're sounding great and you just want to hammer it out, but just take a minute or a few minutes and do a little warm up and get your voice in shape before you start recording. And here's a little side note on tuning. Someone brought this to my attention recently. When you are recording multiple instruments, say a bunch of string instruments, a few guitars and a bass, whatever, tune them on the same tuner. Because what I have recently learned is that some tuners aren't exactly the same. They'll be a few cents off. And then if obviously you record one guitar with one tuner and the other guitar with another tuner, they're going to be a few cents away, and it's going to give you a bit of ugly, out of tune sound. So just something to consider. So now we've got this great song that we've written, and we found a good room to sing it in, and we're all warmed up and we're ready to sing. But what microphone are we going to sing into? There's tons of discussion online about the best vocal mic, and people get really hung up on this. In my opinion, there is no such thing as the best vocal mic. There are certainly microphones that seem to work on a lot of different sound sources, but you can't just research this and without experimenting with a microphone decide that this is the best mic for my voice. You need to actually try it. I've got some solid tips in this video right here that are going to help you efficiently and cost effectively find a microphone that's well suited to your voice. Skip to 6 minutes and 48 seconds and check that out. Now that we have a great microphone that's suited to our voice and we're in our room and things are sounding great, there is another step to actually making the sound a good one, and that is mic placement. And that's like, where are we gonna put the microphone in our room? And this is somewhere where you should definitely be spending some time, because if you're going for like a really dry sound, maybe there is a spot in your room that sounds really dead. Maybe you have some kind of dampening on the wall, some absorption or something. Or maybe you're going for a livelier sound. And so maybe if you move your mic like 3 or 4 feet in this direction, this part of your room is more lively and you're gonna get a better take out of it. So this is somewhere where you should definitely be experimenting and just trying out different parts of your room. Where you position yourself in relation to the microphone is just as important as where the mic is in the room. If you move yourself a few inches away from the microphone, that is going to drastically change the sound. So this is another thing that you should be spending some time experimenting with and trying to get it to sound just right. Here's a cool technique you can use to getting more consistent vocals. And this video kind of just dives a little bit deeper into mic placement and recording. So now we're in our room, we are singing our beautifully written song through a microphone that's well suited to our voice, and we are appropriately distanced from the microphone in a good position in our room. Things are sounding great, and the signal is getting sent to an audio interface. This is another part that I think people get really hung up on and spend a lot of time on. There are massive debates over different preamps and digital to analog converters. And while I do think that these things can definitely improve your sound if you purchase a quality converter or a quality preamp, there are just so many other things before this that you should be focusing on to improve your sound. Things that aren't going to cost you any money at all. Technique. In my opinion, you can create great music and great recordings with entry-level audio interfaces, like these $200 or $300 interfaces that we all see. And like, there's probably something out there for like $100 these days. With like decent converters and a decent preamp that is going to sound good. The next step here is gain staging. And a quick side note, something that has been frustrating me for a while. In the past year or a few years, I guess, I've seen online people trying to teach other people how to gain stage, and they don't understand what gain staging is. A lot of them are saying, okay, now we're going to do some gain staging. We're in our mix and we're going to set our levels, blah, blah, blah. What they're really describing is creating a static mix. And what that means is just after you have all of your sounds recorded, you adjust your levels in your program, you adjust your panning and try to get everything sounding decent before you add things like EQ and compression and whatever. What gain staging really is setting the gain knobs on your interface or your recording device to an appropriate level. This is somewhere where you should be focusing and spending a bit of time to really dial in. We obviously don't want the audio to clip and go into the red and go above 0 dB, because we all know digital distortion sounds like garbage. We don't want that. I'd even argue that in most cases we should stay away from the yellow. I like to record around -15 to -20 dBFS, halfway up the meter. Depending on what your microphone sounds like, you might want to drive it slightly harder or even a bit softer. Again, this is just an experimenting thing. Most of your mixing plugins are designed to work around -18 decibels. So now these vocals that we're recording are being sent through our interface that we have appropriately gain staged, and it's going into the computer and it's going into our DAW. But which DAW is it? This is another spot that people get really hung up on and they waste a lot of time. I see these really, really generic questions all the time, like, what's the best DAW? What's the best DAW for this? And I guess in some cases, you could actually have an answer to that if there's a specific tool or a specific workflow that someone's looking for. But in reality, most DAWs are pretty similar. And the big time waster here is not just finding that DAW that you start using for the first time. It's when you've been using this DAW for a few months and you're still kind of struggling with it and you think you need to switch to another DAW. And so you make the switch and you get something else. And then all that time that you've spent learning those past 3 months, it's just out the window because now you need to learn this completely different program. And then it might even happen again. I've heard of people switching DAWs like 5 times. And if they had just stuck with that initial DAW right from the start, they would have basically mastered it. Now we've got the sound going into our DAW and it's recorded. And the next thing people really want to do is get some crazy ass plugins to throw on their vocal to make it sound amazing. They want to find the best compressor for vocals, or they want to find analog tape saturation in the digital domain. I agree, new plugins are super exciting, they're fun to play with, but if you aren't already recording great sounds and you don't know how to use a compressor in the first place, then why are you trying to upgrade to a different compressor, something that you think is going to magically sound better, when really you just need to master what you have first. You need to really figure out how to use the tools you have before you move on to something that you're going to actually spend money on. I guarantee the tools that your DAW comes with, the EQ and compression and reverb and such, I'm pretty damn sure that they sound great and that they can achieve great results. Stop spending your money on these fancy plugins until you've actually learned how to capture quality audio and balance it. Monitoring. Does it matter? Yes, it matters. Does it matter if you're using speakers or headphones? This is a debate you can get caught up in for a lifetime. People are going to argue this forever. And my opinion is that if you know a system really well, if you've been listening to that same pair of headphones for years and you trust them and you know what they sound like, you can probably get a good mix on them. Headphones are something that I would recommend to a lot of beginners because once we get into the studio monitor realm, we have to also consider the room around us and what the room is doing and how it's affecting our sound. Where are you going to place your monitors? How big is the room? How big should your monitors be in relation to the room? What kind of frequency issues are you having? If you're fairly new to recording and mixing, I would strongly suggest headphones. If you're going to go the monitor route and you're going to buy some speakers, you should dive into acoustics and start learning about your room and how to treat it and what you actually need to make it sound good. And this is an entire different video itself. Actually, this is a million other videos. There's a lot to acoustics, and unless you're willing to spend the time learning, I think for now you should just stick to your headphones and try to get the best mixes you can out of them. Spend as much time as you can with your listening system. Listen to all kinds of songs and try to get a feel for how your speakers respond to these sounds. Just sitting with your playback system, whether it's your headphones or your speakers, and listening, you're actually kind of studying the sound of it. You're just getting used to it. You're learning how it sounds, how different songs and different genres work on those speakers. And then when it comes time for you to mix your song, you're gonna have a better idea of what to aim for. So monitoring, super important. The last part I wanna discuss in this process is mastering. The first thing that I wanna say about mastering is that it's not the answer to your crappy mix. It's not gonna fix anything that you've done. If you did a really great job and you recorded and mixed your song perfectly, all the mastering engineer is gonna do is apply a bit of limiting to make it a bit louder and send it back and say it's done. Mastering can definitely enhance certain parts of your song and make things sound a little more glued together, but you shouldn't be relying on it to fix problems earlier on in the process. So stop relying on the mastering engineer to fix your mistakes. If you take your music seriously and you put a lot of effort into it and you spend some time writing, recording, mixing, you put all your effort into it, I think that you should definitely source a good mastering engineer, because this is an entirely different skill set from the mixing and recording that you would have done to produce your song. And once you find a good mastering engineer, this is someone who you can send your songs to all the time, and you don't need to focus on the mastering. You just work on your bit and do the best you can, and then fire it off to mastering. It's gonna come back and it's gonna sound, if you've done a great job, it's gonna sound just like your mix. And it's going to sound like your mix everywhere on all kinds of playback systems. So that is the entire process in a nutshell. And now what I want to do is just quickly circle back and I'm going to rate each step out of 10. 10 being where you should be spending more time, where you should really be focusing, and 1, not so much. This part of the video is absolutely going to get people smashing that dislike button, mainly because in truth, every step of the process is important. But hopefully this exercise stops you from getting hung up on certain parts of the process and helps you address where your real problems are. So right back to the start here, let's have a look. Songwriting. I gave this a 10 out of 10, and that's because the song is the essence of what we're doing. It's the entire picture here. We need to spend time creating that great song, so that it sounds great in the end. This is like another one of those polishing a turd things. If we have a crap song, it's not gonna sound great no matter what we do to it. So 10 out of 10, focus on the songwriting first. Next up was the room that we're recording in, and I gave that a 9 out of 10. This is gonna be kind of a difficult thing because there's so much bad or skewed information out there, and there's all of these like one size fits all kind of solutions. They're not solutions. So what you really need to do is focus here and spend some time experimenting in your room and figuring this out for yourself. And that's gonna take a bit of time to find what works for you. Next up was the vocal performance, and I gave that a 10 out of 10 because the sound source that we're capturing is extremely important and we need it to sound great and in tune. So you need to be warming up your vocals and just capturing the best vocal take you can. Simple. Next up was choosing a microphone, and I gave that an 8 out of 10. Still pretty high because we do need something that fits our voice. The reason I didn't give it a full 10 is because there are tons of different microphones that are gonna work on our voice, and what you really need to do is just know how to use your tools. So don't spend too much time finding that perfect one-size-fits-all vocal microphone, the end-all be-all mic. Just learn how to use what you have. Next up was mic placement. This is another one that I put a big emphasis on, and I'm gonna give this one a 10 out of 10 as well. Next up is preamps, and this is something where I feel people get really hung up on, and it's not gonna make a huge difference, especially in the early stages of recording and trying to learn all of this at once. Don't spend too much time here. I gave this a 6 out of 10. It's not the most important thing in the world right now, and you should not be getting hung up on these expensive, fancy preamps when you can't even record an acoustic guitar, you know? Then we have gain staging, and I've rated this at a 7 out of 10. You definitely need to spend some time dialing in your gain, but it shouldn't take you that long, and it's not gonna take a ton of your focus. We have somewhat of a window of like the ideal spot to record. We can go a little bit above, we can go a little bit below. We don't need to record 50 takes and listen back to each one and perfectly dial it to like 7.1 on our gain knob. Like, it's not that necessary. We need to definitely get it in the ballpark, but don't waste half your session gain staging. Next up is choosing a DAW that we're gonna work with. And I gave this one a 3 out of 10. If you spend too much time picking a DAW or moving from one to the other, it's gonna take up so much of your time, especially when you're trying to learn these things inside out. So don't get too hung up on it. Pick one, stick with it, and just practice. Next up is monitoring. And I gave this a 9 out of 10 because it definitely takes a lot of time to learn a new playback system, like a new pair of headphones, or a new speaker system. Like, you wanna play a bunch of different songs through it, songs that you know, and see how these speakers or headphones sound. So spend some time with your monitoring system and really get to know it, so that when you get to that mixing stage and you hear your song, you know that you need a little bit more bass in it because you've listened to other songs in this genre and their bass is up here too, or whatever frequency you're mixing. The last part of the process I'm gonna rate here is mastering. And mastering engineers, if you're listening, please don't kill me, hear me out. I gave mastering a 1 out of 10. And the reason I did this is because we are learning how to record and mix and produce our own songs. The last thing we need to do is learn mastering, which is an entirely different skill set than all of these other things. And I truly believe that if we're gonna put this much effort into producing our own music, that we should be looking to a professional mastering engineer, someone who is trained and has been doing this skill for years to master our songs for us. It's not the most expensive thing in the world, and if we're really putting all this other effort into it, why not just send it to someone with a great room, someone with a proper listening environment and proper monitoring, and they have all their mastering tools that we just don't have in our home studios. So let them handle your mastering, hire a mastering engineer. So that's pretty much it. That's how I feel about this process. That's where I feel that you guys should be focusing your time. Looking back at this little rating system I've done, I see right out of the gates, we've got some 10, 9, 10, some pretty high numbers right at the beginning. And then as we move on, it goes lower. I see a 6, 7, get down to some 3s. So what I think I'm really trying to say here is let's focus more on the first few steps in the beginning, the songwriting and our room and capturing our sound properly. And let's spend less time focusing on all this fancy gear and different DAWs and things. We can address these things later once we've really dialed in the preceding steps. but let's not try to skip over any parts of this process. Let's not try to use any magic pill quick fixes or anything weird like that. I understand this is going to be a super controversial video, especially with my whole rating system, because some of you are at different spots than others, but just as a whole, when I'm looking basically online or talking to people that are new to recording and mixing, who have obviously been reading things online, they have all these general concepts and these areas that they think that they should be spending time. And with my little rating system here, this is just me trying to poke holes in where I think people are going wrong and where I think they're spending too much time. So you go ahead, tell me how you feel in the comments. Let me know what you think. I almost forgot my magic pill quick fix that I have used in my studio. And I'll tell you first what my problem was. So I've got an interface, I've got some microphones, and what I was finding was I didn't have quite enough gain on my interface, and I had to crank that gain knob in my gain station phase. I had to crank it right up to almost 10 in order to get enough sound from my dynamic microphones. They have a lower output. When I cranked that gain on my interface, I started getting some pretty ugly sounds and hearing things I didn't want to hear at all. So what I needed was something that was going to boost the signal coming out of my microphone before it hit that interface, so that I could turn those gain knobs down a little bit and stop all of this unwanted sound. And what I've discovered is this. This is the Mcpoot. It's made by Radial here in Canada. And basically what this thing does is you put it between your microphone and your interface. Your microphone goes in, and then a cord goes out to your interface. This thing does up to 25 or 26 decibels of clean gain. This little box instantly solved my problem, gave me all the gain I need, and it's given me the extra little load button to change the impedance of my microphone to give me different characteristics. I can make it sound much brighter and more detailed, it seems, on one of the settings. So that's something cool to check out if you're in need of a signal boost before hitting your interface. And that, my friends, is all I have to say. This is probably a really long video, isn't it? It's probably like 20 minutes. Fuck, I'll try to cut it down, sorry. Thanks for sticking around to hear about my magical fixing device here. I'll see you guys next time.